Will the slides be visible on the screen?
All right, well, welcome everyone to the Mehlman Lecture. I am actually going to briefly introduce Professor Mehlman and let him introduce our speaker. We're really pleased that we have a good turnout, and I know that we have others that will be joining us online. This is a fascinating talk that we're going to hear from somebody who has really used their degree in a unique way. I guess I should say maybe the skills learned, and we'll hear more about that. And Chuck can say whether I'm saying that accurately or not, but we're really thrilled to have him here. He's been a supporter of the law school in many ways for a long time. And so with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Professor Mehlman for a more proper introduction. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Dean Rose, and thank you to the alumni family that endowed this lectureship in my name. It's quite an honor to have a lectureship named after you when you're still teaching. So thank you so much. The Mehlman Lecturers are distinguished law school alums who have made their careers at the intersection of law and medicine. And our 2024 Mehlman Lecturer is Charles E Hallberg. Chuck, as he likes to be called, graduated from our law school in 1977. He practiced first as a trial lawyer, and then he joined the legal team at Revco Drugstores. He left Revco to start a pharmacy benefits management company, sold it, got a $75,000 small business loan, and started another called Member Health, which he ran with his daughter in his basement. In 2002, it had 13 employees. When Medicare started the Part D drug program in 2006 to cover outpatient prescription drugs, Member Health opted in and eventually had 1,200 employees, revenues of $1.5 billion, and provided Part D drug coverage to more than 1 million Medicare beneficiaries through a network of over 60,000 pharmacies. Chuck sold Member Health in 2007 for $630 million. Another one of Chuck's companies was Cover My Meds, a drug prior authorization system used by 700,000 providers and 49,000 pharmacies, which he sold in 2017 for $1.4 billion. He's now launching a new company, Aerotone, which will provide novel assistance to patients with respiratory ailments. When I was originally going to introduce him, I was going to say our Mehlman lecturer is Horatio Alger. Oh, sorry, Charles Hallberg, but I'm sure he's heard that before. Chuck actually has a connection to my family. He received his BA in philosophy from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, which he attended when my wife was a graduate student there, and when her mother administered the College of Arts and Sciences, which included the philosophy department. So go figure. While at UMass, Chuck was a senator in the student government and instituted the first system for informing students about courses and syllabi and for evaluating their professors, first time that had ever been done. He's continued his interest in improving higher education, as Dean Rose said, and serves as a trustee of our university, Case Western Reserve University. Chuck's aptly titled talk today is a lawyer with an entrepreneurial spirit or an entrepreneur with a law degree, how a law degree provides skills that can make you rich. Yeah, it helps to be lucky too. Without more, please welcome Chuck Hallberg.
Thank you, Professor Mehlman, for that wonderful introduction, and Dean Rose for your kind comments. Thanks to the law school and for all of you attendees. I understand that a lot of folks are out there on YouTube remotely. So welcome all of you. Even though we can't see you, we're glad you're here. It's when Dean Scharf asked me to give this lecture, I think he forgot that I really haven't practiced law since the 90s. So coming up to speed to provide CLE was a bit of a challenge. But, as I thought about everything, and let's see, we'll go to the agenda here. As I thought about everything, there are at least 5 core legal fundamentals that have been steadfast beams, if you will, in my career. And I thought I'd share that with you. And then talk a little bit about our story and our history and show you how all of those 5 fundamentals kind of interwove right into our everyday business. Well, we already kind of talked about who I am, we'll then have a little review of some things that maybe law school doesn't teach you very well. I'll give you some of my biases of key elements that I think you need to have to grow and manage a company. But fundamentally, or I should say, the legal fundamentals that I embrace, and I think fast-growing companies should all embrace, are first and foremost, let's start with the facts, please. It's such an important element. We'll get into that in just a bit. Trial practice or corporate culture. If you don't have a story, you don't have a chance. It's just fundamental. Compliance, standing apart. Government regulations are your friends. I know that may seem a challenge for some people, but government regulations are your friends. Antitrust competition is evidence of a good opportunity. Being first or being fast is really pretty cool too. And then the last fundamental is something that we certainly see in our business every single day, right out of the fundamentals of administrative law. If you can't speak their language, they don't have to listen. And if it ain't in writing, it doesn't exist. So those are sort of what I would call the agenda and the fundamentals. Some of the things that they don't teach you very well in law school are typically not well addressed. We don't have to go into the details on any of these. Most of you would be familiar with it. You know, you're not going to get a finance degree if you're at law school. Marketing, branding, operations, strategic planning. Venture capital, they're going to teach you how to do forms, but they're not going to teach you how to raise the money and how to make the close to get it. I'm sure that there's a lot of other things that they don't teach you in law school, but they teach you a lot of good things too. And that's this kind of stuff we're going to talk about today. So again, some of my biases, things that I think are important to running a business, and you'll feel and see these themes woven through the rest of the lecture. You can never move fast enough, no matter how fast you're going. If you can go faster, you should. That doesn't mean be reckless. That doesn't mean gloss over things. That doesn't mean cut corners. It just means go really fast. Numbers run a business, your KPIs. So many people that are starting businesses or are new to it, or you're advising clients, if they aren't looking at KPIs, they're in danger already. Don't hire your friends. It may seem like a good idea, but again, it's a process. You use your tools, use your rules. We'll talk about some of that when we talk about the who's involved in all of this stuff. Again, learn their language. Listen first, talk second. Solve their problems. It's all administrative law. Cash is king. Sales don't happen till you cash the check. I know there's all kinds of rules about accrual and everything else, but I will tell you that every time a business starts to book things and it's not in cash, they're probably in danger. Ideas are 2%, execution is 98%. That was something my father used to say all the time. My sisters used to loathe it when he said it. And it was very interesting, though, if anybody read the Wall Street Journal article 2 days ago about Tim Cook at Apple, they basically said the exact same thing in that article, that innovation is 1 or 2%, and the rest of it is all about innovating the execution of it. Again, regulations are your friends. You always need to leverage, and I always focus on social, financial, and knowledge. Competition is comfort food. Then just a couple of other things. Culture is not a goal. It's a product of what you, if you're the CEO, create. And you can create a great culture, or you can create a really shit environment. And I've seen companies that do both. And that doesn't mean to say that, if you're if you're Trump, that you can't run a good business. but it helps a lot if you have a great culture. Weed the garden. You can't grow a company, you can't really be fast unless you understand that jobs outgrow people, people outgrow jobs, things change, and you have to constantly be of a mind that you need to be coaching and working with people and changing and adapting all the time. Family and life is always more important than work. And finally, never regret anything but learn from everything. So we already talked about who I am, so we can kind of skip over that, I think. So let's just jump right into it. Let's start with the facts. So I think every law student knows the first thing you do is look at a recitation of the facts. And every squib, everything else, everybody starts with the facts. We sort of all know that. We know from the Twombly case, the Supreme Court recently said it's no longer just bald, notice pleading. You've got to plead sufficient facts to at least create a plausible claim, cause of action. But that's not enough. If you're a trial attorney or you're working on a major complicated transaction for a client, if you don't understand the facts, you don't have a chance. You really got to know that you know what you know. And you will be amazed if you're advising clients or if you become an entrepreneur, you'd be amazed at how many times you're assuming something, thinking it's true, but you've never actually really challenged it. There's something called a business process analysis or you can also call it critical path management. There's a lot of different names for how you might want to do it, but it's something that we did all the time, constantly digging into the facts, grinding through them, getting very granular, and it's by understanding those facts and the processes underlying those facts that you can really drive a business. And again, that ties back into your numbers. Know your stuff. You have to know that you know what you know. And that gap analysis is a good measure of that whole business process analysis. And that ties into your staff. When we'll talk about the what's, we'll talk about, once you know who you have, what are they supposed to be doing? Well, do you treat your staff in a manner that your company experiences the least number of mistakes? My wife Sharon is in the back, and she and I were sailboat racers up here in Cleveland for a lot of years. And, you might have 100 boats that are on a starting line. And we did one design sailing, so all the boats are identical. They weigh the same, they have the same sails, probably have the same number of crew, probably the crew weighs about the same because there's usually weight limits on crew. So how is it that, you get 100 boats and there's 3 or 4 or 5 guys that are like a half a mile ahead? What do they know that you don't know, right? Well, what it probably is that they are making fewer mistakes. By eliminating friction, you look like you're going really, really fast. So one of the big keys that we focused on all the time is making sure that you solve a problem before it's a crisis. And by having the least amount of friction, it's going to make you look like you're a very, very fast organization. And all of that comes down to knowledge and facts. So the very first fundamental principle that you learn as a first-year law student of knowing and being able to recite the facts is probably the most fundamental thing to the core of growing a business as well. So what's next? Well, if you don't have a story, you don't have a chance. I was really privileged. My last year of law school here, I believe, was Professor McElhaney's first year. And I was intending to be a trial attorney, so I certainly took advantage of his expertise. And if you read his treatise, he totally emphasizes that you have to create a compelling story, something that people can empathize with, something that people can relate to, something that people can understand and internalize, something that's understandable to an intelligent 12-year-old person. Take the jargon out. If it's technical, make it simple, make it understandable. Can your customers relate to this? And that's the tie into business. It's the same thing with your staff and with your businesses. At Member Health and at Cover My Meds, and it will be also at Aerotone, everything starts with a theme and with a story. Some of them are pretty funny. When we were planning to grow Member Health, the government passed this law, the Medicare Modernization Act, and it was ready, set, go, a $90 billion new business. And we said to the staff of, I think, 22 people at the time, hey, if all we get is the table scraps that nobody else wants, we're going to be almost $1 billion company. We just get 1%. So some of the folks at the staff decided that, yeah, that's a great idea. It's like the Oklahoma schooners. If you remember in the pioneer days, they gave away land out in Oklahoma, and they would let people line up in their wagon trains, and then it was ready, set, go, and they would all race out to get their land. It was a land grab. And so our staff created about a 12-foot banner, and on it was a covered wagon, and it was called the Chuck Wagon. And they used that to show the progress of how many patients we enrolled. So as we were getting to our land grab little plot of earth in Oklahoma, we could track things as they went along. So you always want to have a theme, and it sounds kind of silly sometimes for people when you might be advising them, or you might be talking to them, or you might be doing it yourself, to focus on literally, okay, this is like a trial. We got to have a theme. We had a theme, and that theme never varied, actually. If it's all about the patients, it's all about the patients. Government regulations are your friends. Well, let's just jump to the punchline on that. The biggest thing it does for a business is it keeps out the riffraff. There's all kinds of people that want to cut corners and want to do this and want to do that, or don't want to do this, don't want to do that. And what you find is that, and I have noticed of late, you'll see a lot of advertisements where companies show how many things they're in organizations that they're compliant with. Well, because it builds trust. It builds confidence. And regulations can keep out those players that are not committed to doing the job completely and correctly. And I'll talk a little bit about my own personal experience in that. When I was at Revco, I used to do a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Sidney Dworkin never saw a deal he didn't like. In 8 years, I probably did 150 transactions. They were all purchases. He almost never sold anything. He just wanted to buy them. One of them, he bought several drug manufacturing companies. One of them was a company called Carter Glogow. Very interesting company. They made liquid generics, and many of the liquid generics were for premature babies. They were vitamins. Ronnie Carter, because I negotiated the deal, Ronnie Carter hated the FDA. And he would rail, I mean rail, about, I'm just making a generic of things that are already out there. Why are they making me go through all these trials, all of this, all of that, everything else? I mean, this was something I listened to as counsel for him. I listened to it day in and day out for months and months and months. Well, guess what happened? They made a vitamin for premature infants, and the non-active ingredient killed at least 40 children. The non-active ingredient killed at least 40 children. Well, how does that fit into your Sunday night dinner with family and friends? It's pretty awful. Bankrupted an insurance company, and it was just a terrible thing. And Ronnie Carter was never the same the rest of his life. So, to me, as a young lawyer, that was just a compelling story of why you should embrace regulations, real life experience. And what we have found, especially working with Medicare and the states and Medicaids, is that if you're a compliant person, you're going to be regarded as a friend. Now, another interesting anecdote: when we first launched the Medicare program, the feds provided us in the statute a 3-year waiver from state insurance regulation. They wanted new players to come into the marketplace, and so part of the statute was I didn't have to talk to anybody in any state if I didn't want to for 3 years. I only had to deal with CMS. Well, we ended up with 25% or more market share in a number of states. I can tell you that scared the bejesus out of a lot of governors and their departments of insurance. But what did we do? We put together a roadshow with my general counsel, some outside lawyers, our various actuaries, and our operations staff, and we went on a roadshow and went to virtually every state in the country. And I gave them my personal cell phone number, and said, listen, if you have a problem with Mabel, if she calls and she has a difficult issue with us, you call me personally day or night, and we are going to take care of it. And that's the type of again, compliance with regulations that just changes the whole scenario from, I could have thumbed my nose at them, not even taken their call if I'd wanted to. But we went to the expense and the time and the effort to visit with every one of them because that was the right way to do it. Whoops, forgot. Okay, competition antitrust. So this is pretty straightforward. Being first is cool, being fast is cool, but again, I harken back to the article in the Wall Street just a couple of days ago. Apple is famous for not being first, but for being the best, for doing the best job they possibly can. If you want to grow a company, it doesn't have to be, you know, a Zuckerberg. It doesn't have to be a Facebook. I think some of the best businesses out there are known problems that people want to solve, and you have a good idea that provides a solution, maybe in an innovative way, a more disruptive way, a less complicated way. Those are things that, again, and the antitrust law, if you look at some of those cases, really drive that home. And sort of I'll compare the three companies that I've had. Member Health, as we talked about, $90 billion business. We thought, okay, if we get 1%, we're golden. That would be great. So that, and that was just doing what everybody else is doing. Cover My Meds, as they talked about, is we had seen a problem at Member Health that if you had a prior authorization for a drug, if your doctor wrote a prescription and the benefit manager required prior approval for that drug, we observed in our own house, because we had 20 or 30 or 40 pharmacists just looking at these things every day, that if the doctor and the pharmacist went through all the hoops, it took about a doctor about a half an hour, it took a pharmacist about a half an hour to get through all the paperwork. But if they did all of that, we were approving 96% of them. So it was, oh my God. So the doctor is actually doing the right thing. So after Member Health, some of the leadership and some of the senior guys from our team started Cover My Meds with the premise that they could reverse engineer every insurance plan in America, figure out how to do this, put it on the internet, make it a 5-minute job for an administrative assistant. At the end of the day, they ended up with 90% of the pharmacies, 90% of the doctors, 90% of the hospitals, and 90% of the insurance companies in America endorsing and using that plan. Nobody even talks about prior authorization anymore as a problem because it's gone away. So they ended up with a natural monopoly, which is probably, and of course, once you had all of those pieces, then you become big data. And big data is really valuable, and McKesson paid a lot of money for that company, which we were very happy. Now, Aerotone comes in and is uniquely different in a third way. We have several patents that that address how you use an inhalation device. That's strictly what we're going to be focused on, the 52 million people in America that use an inhaler and get 100 million prescriptions a year for it. The CMS estimates that 3/4 of them, probably 39 million people, use it wrong, use their inhaler incorrectly. We are the first company. There's a lot of companies that claim that they're digitizing these kind of medical devices. We're the only company that has the patents to listen to your breathing and convert that through using algorithms for your air volume and your rate, the same thing a doctor would do when they use a spirometer to measure your lung function. So now, when a person it's a little simple sleeve, it's going to cost us a few dollars to manufacture, and we can wrap it right over the inhaler, or the drug manufacturer could build it right into their product if they want to. But every time you use your inhaler, we're going to get the information coming through your smartphone or your tablet from the device, and every month we'll be able to see, okay, are you green, yellow, or red? If you're doing it correctly, great. If you're not doing it correctly, the government has provided almost $90 per session to help people understand how to use it correctly. So we are going to be taking this to our 60,000 pharmacies and provide them with a new source of revenue, something that they want very much. The government is desperate to solve this problem. There's billions of dollars of avoidable emergency room visits, especially with pediatrics, and hospitalizations, particularly with seniors and people in nursing homes. And it's an awful situation for both the government, for the patient, for the pharmacies, and we're going to solve it. And guess what? We're going to be doing a really great thing for all of these people, and we're going to make a few bucks at the same time. So that's sort of why we think competition is a really good thing. And then sort of that last fundamental, and then we'll kind of talk about a little bit about the businesses and how it all weaves into all of this. You have to speak their language. And it is, in fact, the obligation of the communicator to communicate. It's not the obligation of the listener to understand what you're trying to say. So you have to know that what you're saying is something that they understand. You can't just say whatever techno-gobbledygook you want to say and assume that somebody else is going to understand it. We were very fortunate that our business partner was Computer Sciences Corporation because they had 26 separate contracts with CMS. So they literally took us under their arm and mentored us in how to communicate with our major governmental partner, which was an enormous leg up. I don't have that with Aerotone, but we know the roadmap. And so we're already working with consultants, with people that have done it before in other industries. We are literally knee-deep in making sure that we know how to talk to the people that we need to talk to because they're the ones that have the money and we want to get the pharmacies paid. And then the other thing, and we'll talk about more about this a little later on, is put it in writing. I mean, so many young companies and growing companies, they have meetings, they have Zooms, they have conversations, but it's not written. And I'm here to tell you, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. It gives everybody a hall pass, gives everybody an excuse to say, well, okay, I told them they had to get this done, or whatever it was. It is so fundamental to understand that element of administrative law, that to understand how an agency thinks, how do they issue their priorities, how do they interpret themselves. And each agency, we all know, is different. The SEC is a whole lot different from Social Security Administration. The SEC is actually pretty clear. You can actually understand what they say when they write. It might be long, but you can understand it. Try to understand anything that comes out of Social Security Administration. It's like, you can spend months and never really understand what they're saying. Anyway, so now we get into some of the fun stuff. We've talked a little bit about member health, but I wanted to give you two fun little anecdotes of when we were starting member health, some of the things that can happen to you. And maybe a couple of you, I think, Bob, you've heard these stories before. But, one of our main partner, of course, was Computer Sciences Corporation. But it's a Fortune 150 company, and they're in, jillions of countries and all sorts of stuff. And we were fortunate that my wife Sharon's little account was the Department of Defense worldwide. And that was also a contract with Computer Sciences Corporation. And so we had an inside track on how CSC thinks and does things. And we knew that they could be fickle and they could decide to no bid a contract even at the 11th hour. So all the while we were preparing for the application process under the Medicare Modernization Act, even though they were going to be the prime contractor and we were going to be a subcontractor to them, we had a parallel universe floating under the radar where we would be the prime contractor and they would be a subcontractor. And they knew this. Our team at CSC knew this and agreed with us that this was a wise way to go. Well, it happened. On the morning that the application was due at CMS, 11 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from, whatever it is, Segundo, California, CMS's, CSC's corporate headquarters, that they're going to no-bid the contract. So we immediately go into, rush mode and do a search and replace on all the documentation. Now, the documentation is like a carton it's like hundreds and hundreds of pages. So it's a big job. We spent all day doing it. And the CSC office that we were dealing with is only a mile from CMS headquarters over in Baltimore. So at the end of the day, about 5 minutes to 5 when it was due, maybe 10 to 5, the bunch of them jump in a car with the curtain. They're going to bring it over, drive it over, and deliver it before the 5 o'clock deadline at CMS. And they look, and there, right on the cover page, it still had CSC instead of member health. And so they said, oh my God, we have to change this. We can't submit it this way. Nobody in the car had a pen. One of the ladies in the car pulls out her mascara. You can't make this stuff up. She pulls out her mascara, lines out Computer Sciences Corporation, and writes in her mascara member health, and that was the document that got filed with the government. So now the other fun story that happened shortly after that, application is approved, and we get it, and the day after the application was in, or maybe 2 days later, I get a call from the chief actuary at CMS. We had forecast that we were going to enroll 1 million people. Now, the fact of the matter is we enrolled 1,200,000. So we knew exactly what we were going to do, and we hit our marks. But what I didn't know is that the actuary department at CMS wanted us to prove that we had the risk capital as an insurance company to support the underlying risk cost of 1 million people, which was about $400 million in cash. Well, okay, we are now up to doing about $67 million a year in sales. But what were we? We're a bunch of desks and computers. That's all we were. We didn't have any money. So I said, well, don't we have the leeway to make a unilateral amendment to our application in the first 5 days? Yes, Mr. Hallberg, you do. Thank you so much. We're only going to enroll a couple of 100,000 people. And we still enrolled 1,200,000, but I only had to come up with about 25 million in risk capital, which we got investors to do rather than $400 million. So that was a couple of fun stories along the way. But anyway, so now let's talk about the who's. Now I'm going to kind of shift gears from sort of the legal stuff and what our journey was and how we utilized these 5 fundamentals in the business and how it served us and how we were able to be very successful in that process. We really had 2 who's, customers and employees. And in terms of customers, we had 3. We had patients. We knew the type of patients. I mean, we knew who our patient was. I don't know that I'll ever know something as much as I knew that then. I don't know if that's good English, but we really knew that person. We did not want the price-conscious purchaser. We did not want a Walmart purchaser. We were working with mom-and-pop drugstores. At the time, there was about 35,000 of them. And our patients were going to mom-and-pop stores. Well, they're not going there for the best price. They're going there for the personalized service. They were risk-adverse. They wanted to know that they were going to be taken care of properly. So we designed our plans with those people in mind. Broad array of coverage. We had to make sure that we met the federal benchmarks, because if you were too expensive, then you wouldn't qualify for the subsidies that patients would be entitled to if they were low income or if they were disabled. So we had to manage that to at least a penny below the benchmarks. We had to, as I said, have a rich enough array of benefits to meet the needs of a quite disparate population. And it had to have the support of the pharmacies. And so a couple of things, and this talks about the alignment and how you do this kind of stuff. We knew that many of our patients were going to be low income, and they only had to pay $1 for a generic drug. That was the law. It's the most you could charge them. But what we heard when we listened to the pharmacies is that most of these people couldn't afford the dollar. For most of these people, a dollar was a buying decision. So the pharmacies would just waive it and eat the dollar. Happens all the time, every day. So what did we do? To help the pharmacies, actuarially, we built that cost of that dollar into the insurance premium. So the pharmacies could be whole. It wasn't really a benefit for the patient, but it turned out that it was. and we didn't really plan it that way. We planned it for the pharmacies and to solve their problem. But it worked out great. We were one of the very first plans ever in the country to offer free generic drugs. And it had an astounding effect on the marketplace. Generic substitution rates were about 48% the first year of the Medicare Modernization Act. The next year, they were well above 80%. And sort of how that transitioned was because we wanted the pharmacies really engaged in this, we created a report that every quarter showed for every store, even the chains, it was store by store, as to how efficient they were in dispensing generics, which means were they dispensing of the pool of all the generics, of all the drugs that could be dispensed generically, what percentage were they actually dispensing? And we offered them more money, a higher dispensing fee, the more efficient they were. Well, guess what? It turns out that a number of the drugstore chains started using our quarterly report for their managers' quarterly bonuses. So they would because it's a tide that rises all boats. If they're doing it for our plan, they're going to be doing it for everybody because they're not going to do it for one way and not for the others. So we inadvertently drove the utilization of generic drugs in a single year. Now, there was other things happening at the same time, don't get me wrong. Drugs come off patent, and they become generics, et cetera, et cetera. So we weren't the only element in this, but we were a big contributor, and all of that was starting from the point of listening to the pharmacies and trying to solve a problem that they had. So that sort of talks a little bit about the pharmacies and how we approach that. The government with CSC, we talked about that. A lot of that is just being a great partner, learning to speak their language, coming to them with questions when there was any doubt, making sure you get written clarification, that sort of stuff. What's the punchline of all of this? The overwhelming majority of our customers referred to us 2 or more of their friends and acquaintances. I had no sales department. We had no marketing budget. We had no advertising budget. We started out with $1.2 million. When we sold the company, we had 1,700,000 patients, and it was all organic, all viral. So that was, what we thought was pretty cool stuff. The other who is employees. As Jim Collins wrote in his book, Good to Great, you have to get the right people on the bus. And you'll see this ties back into the fundamentals. To build a great team, you got to hire the best. And we were able to surround ourselves with really some exceptional people. But we did it using rules and tools. Every person went through a DISC assessment. I mean, every person that was a candidate, sort of the final 5 or whatever. Behaviors and motivators, which we spent a lot of time developing. You don't want your chief financial officer to be a fighter jet pilot who's willing to take risks. You kind of want him to be the passenger pilot that's going to be very cautious. So those are the sort of things that behaviors and motivators show you. They're not the job skills itself. They're what the rest of the stuff that a person brings to the table. But another thing that we did is we never designed a job and said we got to find somebody that does this. We would interview the candidates generally with that description, but we would hire the best candidate that we could find, irrespective of whether they could do all of the elements that we wanted them to do. And we called that gap analysis. So by hiring the very best, and if there was an element that somebody was going to, because everybody has strengths and everybody has weaknesses. I mean, we're all people. So if we could support the weaknesses, great, we would set up, and that might be some other team members or other people to help. If we didn't have anybody, which, while we were small, we probably didn't have a lot of people, we sort of put it in the bucket for the next hire that we could afford. Is okay, we'll go get that talent with the next person. And that's how we built our team. We did not build a team by saying, here's a job description, let's go find somebody, and they will succeed or fail by whether or not they do what we expect them to do. We expected them to do what they could excel at. And we knew it was our job to support them where they were not going to be good. So let's see. We spent a lot of effort finding the right people in those ways, but we also had a number of other things. If you're growing a company fast, you should have a plan B, a plan C. When the Medicare Modernization Act actually launched, it was pretty much chaos. And we soon figured out that we had to hire another 400 people, another 500 people in 4 weeks, within 4 weeks. But fortunately, we had modeled out to several million enrollees what it was going to take to support that kind of number of patients. And so we had tools at our hand. And so well before the launch, we had contracts in place for outsourcing personnel, call center people, nurses, all sorts of stuff like that. So we had all of that in place. And so we actually did bring on another 500 people in less than 4 weeks. And then as we could hire more, or as some of the chaos calmed down, it leveled out. But you really need to be thinking about all of that stuff. So then once you have the right people, you got to give them the tools to be successful. We spent an inordinate amount of money on training and analytical tools. Every month, and a lot of small companies say, I can't afford to do that. We're running and we're busy. I say you can't afford not to do that. We started training programs immediately, and we had 2 tracks every month. One track was job related. It might be on a drug, or it might be on some element of government or whatever, but it was in some fashion job related. And we had one track that was just skills related. So maybe it would be learning advanced features of Microsoft Office, or the database, or programming, or whatever. Just general skills that people could then use to leverage themselves into a different position at the company, or a promotion, whatever. And they were all free, and they're all available, at times when staff could go. And it's amazing what that does to the culture of an organization, and how much responsibility they assume for the organization and their job. There's just no shortcut to those sort of people relationships. You build the team, you build loyalty. When we did launch, we discovered that the eligibility data that CMS had was oftentimes sorely out of date. Our pharmacies knew to the live minute what a person's status was in a government program. We received, on average, 5,000 faxes a day of changes to Medicare eligibility. I had numerous phone calls with the head of CMS arguing over this, and they at first were insistent that we use their eligibility data, which would have meant rejecting the prescriptions for these people. And we said, no, we're not doing that. And within a few weeks, the government actually reversed itself, and they started accepting our information as the most valid information, because it was live right from the patient and the pharmacy that day. And what ended up happening is we had staff that moved into the building. They brought in cots, and they stayed there and they slept there for weeks on end to get this backlog cleaned out. Now, we didn't ask them to do that, but they wanted to do that. I don't know how they took a shower because we didn't really have that stuff. It's kind of a separate thing, but we were extremely grateful for it. And again, some of the things that we would do with staff is when you have exceptional people doing exceptional things like that, you've got to figure out how to reward them. And so what we would do is on an ad hoc basis, if somebody did a great thing, we would send their whole family to the Great Wolf Lodge if they had a family. Or if it was just a couple, maybe to a weekend in New York City. Or we'd find out what they were interested in and literally pay all expenses paid for a weekend somewhere so that they could get some R&R and relax. And people loved it. They really did. It was great stuff. So what we're doing, let's see, we're into getting, pretty soon we're going to get into the what's. So all of this is about listen first, talk second. For a person like me that likes to talk, that's really hard. But when you listen to them, what is it that they want but can't get? And it's never about what you have to sell. It's about what they need. And you got to be able to adapt and address that sort of stuff. And it's not necessarily where somebody's going to give you a formal presentation. You got to spend time. You got to have conversations. In business settings or at dinners, wherever, you got to be listening, and you've got to pick up the nuances of what they're really saying to you and how they're saying it. Showing that you understand not just their business, but their relationships to their customers vastly strengthens their ability to trust and rely upon your solutions. It's as straightforward as that. Anyway, so communication, huddles. Has anybody heard of business huddles? we didn't invent it, but we adopted it, and every day, every person in the company was in a meeting, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, stand-up meeting, and usually there was 3 or 4 or 5 things and it was all, and by the by, everybody's answer is written every day on a whiteboard. First question is always, what's the number one thing you have to do today? What's the one thing you have to do today? Then there's going to be questions like, is there any roadblocks? What is your roadblock? If it happens to be Sam in another department, you don't want to be Sam on the 3rd day that you're Joe's roadblock because it's going to get really warm in that room. And you don't want to be the person that says, hey, I got this. I can fix this. I don't need to tell anybody. Don't you guys tell the boss this because I got this. No, that doesn't happen because guess what? On the 3rd day, it wasn't their number one, and now it's a crisis. And everybody in the room looks at you and say, we could have helped you solve this 3 days ago. We're your team members. Why didn't you tell us? Now we all have to scramble. What ends up happening, and it took about maybe 6 months to develop, is all of a sudden I have the easiest job in the company because everybody, you have all your KPIs up there. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Everybody knew what they had to do, and everybody knew everything that was going on in the company every day. So customer service started early in the morning. By, say, 9 o'clock, we would have the executive teams huddle. By that time, if there was anything going on in the company, it would percolate up to us every single day. So we had the buzz of what was going on that morning from what was going on the night before, the afternoon before. We did quarterly all-hands meetings. And every employee, maybe not all the customer service people, because somebody's got to stay manning the phones, but as many people as we could afford to do, we would go off-site. And we would have all-hands meetings where people got to talk about, are we meeting our goals? Are we meeting our vision? How are we doing? What's the status? What can we do better? And you'd be amazed at how much engagement and contributions these people would do. And again, it comes down to these same 5 principles. You're dealing with the facts. Are you communicating? Do you understand the theme, what we're trying to accomplish? All of these things weave in on a daily basis. So once you have these people and they know who they are, the next thing is, well, what are they supposed to be doing? So the huddles are part of it, but by the same token, and this comes into a lot of the writing and everything else, we had our KPIs plastered everywhere in the building. And it was talk time, number of enrollments, pharmacies, how many prescriptions. I mean, you name it, we measured it. And those measurements were posted all throughout the building every single day. So everybody knew how we were doing every single day. You didn't have to ever tell somebody what their job was. Because if our talk time, let's say it was an average of 2 minutes and 30 seconds, we had about 800 customer service people. If it suddenly went to 2 minutes and 40 seconds across 800 people, we got a problem. Something's wrong. 10 seconds might not seem much, but when it's an average for the whole day across 800 people, that means that people are calling and complaining about something that's not right. And so we were able to jump on it that day and fix it. And these are the sorts of things that when you do that, and you have those kind of metrics out there all the time, you're going to find that problems either don't come up or they're able to be dealt with before they're a crisis. And that's, and again, what's happening then? You're eliminating friction. When you're eliminating friction, you're growing faster, you're moving faster. But if everything is oral, it's the old, well, we talked about that at the meeting. Why didn't they do anything? Or it gives people an excuse. Well, I don't think they really said that. I thought they said something else. And we just eliminated all of that sort of corporate bullshit out of our company. And Cover My Meds did the same exact thing. It was just never part of our culture. That nobody would ever think to say something like that because everything's in writing all the time and visible to everybody. So, if you're going to have meetings, have an agenda, have people taking notes, and making sure that it's all written down, and some of this ties in as well beyond just your meetings and everything else. It ties into your vision. We said early on, culture is not a goal; it's the product of what you create, and the vision is sort of the whys. Why are you doing this? And that should never change. How you do things strategically can change a lot in a growing company. And again, depending on the agencies you might be working with or what's going on, a lot of the hows can change dramatically, but those whys should be sacrosanct. And okay, I'm taking too long. But anyway, so a lot of times companies do know what to do, but they don't know how to do it. And that's what we were just chatting about a little bit. Let me just jump ahead here. That's really sufficient. When, the hows can be very chaotic. We would often have to re-baseline our company, re-budget it twice a year, from the ground up and from the top down. And from both sides, when it met in the middle, that might be good. But how you do something when you got, say, 50 people is a whole lot different than how you might be doing things when you have 1,000 people. And we grew that very quickly. So what you did 6 months ago might have been perfectly appropriate as a procedure 6 months ago, but might be silly now. And again, it ties into jobs outgrow people. People outgrow jobs. We actually had people that I never understood why we had them, because I just didn't think they were a fit for the company at all. And then all of a sudden we got bigger, and the job got narrower, and some of these people just fit perfectly. And I said, aren't you guys brilliant that you kept this guy? So these are all things that fall into those same sort of dynamics of those 5 legal fundamentals. I hope you've been able to see, at least from my particular reliance on these 5 things from slide 2, as to what it all means and how I was able to use that successfully. Each of those principles is encountered every day as we're building Aerotone. Each one of them is a stalwart beam that can hold the weight of a fast-growing company, and ignoring any one of them endangers the enterprise. But I want to part also with sort of a postscript of what I call the ultimate paradox for the entrepreneur. I suspect many of the people here and remotely, like me, are in some fashion a type A. We're people that have a strong ego. We have a lot of resilience. We can undergo all kinds of obstacles and everything else to build an organization. But yet, at the end, if you've gotten anything from this lecture, it's never about our big idea. It's never about our clarity of vision, how many magazines we're featured in, or anything else about us. It's always about the customers and your staff. Have we given them the tools, the whats, the hows, the whys, the wheres, and the responsibilities with precision so that our customers want to recommend their friends and acquaintances to our business? I certainly believe, and from the center of my heart, that when the answer to that is yes, good things are going to happen. Thanks so much for your time.
We have a reception upstairs, but if there are any questions, we might have time for a couple of questions. Anybody? Do we need a microphone?
Talk pretty loud.
No, but we're
Oh, right,
so
gotcha.
hang on.
Don't make it too hard a question.
So first off, this was so great. So thank you so much. This was so informative and just really get your wheels turning. But you mentioned that you didn't have marketing or anything when you sold your first million. So how did you get your first million customers without any marketing or advertising budgets or?
What a great question. So as I mentioned, we had franchised ourselves, sort of a loose term, not a legal term, with the independent pharmacy market, the mom and pop drugstores, and there was about 35,000 of them. They were prohibited by law from recommending a particular plan under Part D. It was absolutely against the law. But what they did was they allowed me to bring in an independent insurance agent, and we hired about 35,000 of them that were independent agents, and they were given permission to set up a card table in the pharmacy. And the pharmacist we gave them a script, and the pharmacy was allowed to say, you know, Mabel, there's a lot of plans that work for you. I can't tell you which one is the best necessarily, but I know that one will work for you. And that was all it took, because the pharmacist is the most trusted professional in this country. And we found that virtually all of them signed up, and I paid a commission to the insurance agent, but I only paid it when they made a sale. So and a card table, they brought their own with a chair.
Wow. Great. Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, let us thank our speaker again. Our refreshments? Yes.
Thanks for coming.